The Ring House. Like the old days, the caravan moved slowly and majestically. We immersed ourselves in the soft darkness of dawn, not to drink poetry this time, but to receive blows from prison memories and regrets from a wasted life. I saw the ghosts of comrades and saw a new generation of merchants. Activity continues to progress, money is multiplying, and prestige is hunting adventurers. As for the dreamers, confusion continues. I have to bear my past frustrations, when I left the country mourning Halima, when I was expelled from the East crying as a bride, and when I bid farewell to confusion, lamenting happiness and youth. I looked to the east and saw it rippling with red rose water, and the face of the sun sank as it had done for 20 years, and the desert appeared endless, and summer spread. The journey continued for nearly a month, and at one of the rest stops I asked the owner of the caravan about Al-Khani bin Hamdis, and he said to me, "The rest of your life." I asked about Sheikh Magaha al-Jubaili, but neither he nor any of the caravan's merchants had heard of him. We camped in Al-Sham in preparation for entering the arena. My beard had grown, as had the hair on my head, and the blood of health was flowing again. We continued walking until we saw the Great Wall under the light of the square moon, and the customs director came up to us in his light jacket suitable for the mild summer weather, and said in a cheerful voice, "Welcome to the circuit, the capital of the circuit house, the house of freedom." I was astonished to hear the cursed word everywhere, and I was also astonished that his words were devoid of an overt or hidden warning. I said to the owner of the caravan, "The first house to welcome the arrival without warning." He laughed, saying, "It is the house of freedom, but caution is the safety of the stranger." They took me alone to the guest hotel. On the way, under the moonlight, landmarks of the city were scattered in a grandeur suggestive of a new view, to a multitude of howitzers going and wailing in the light of torches, despite our approaching the last hour of the night. As for the entrance to the hotel, it was leveled in breadth and depth under a canopy from which hung lanterns in the form of eye-catching. The hotel building seemed huge and high, expressing the beauty of engineering and the grace of wealth. As for my room, it had another surprise for me, its blue walls, its plush carpet, its high brass bed with its brocade covers, and other things that are usually found only in noble homes in my homeland. Here I see a civilization with an eloquent tongue that is undoubtedly superior to the civilization of confusion in degrees and degrees. And I found myself wondering, where and how does Arusa live? Before I could immerse myself in the memories, I was visited by a middle-aged man wearing a blue jacket and short white pants. He said with a smile, "Kalsham, the hotel manager." So I introduced myself to him and he asked me gently, "What service?" I said frankly, "Nothing is better than sleeping now unless you tell me the accommodation fee." He said with a smile, 3 dinars per night. I was astonished by the number and said to myself that everything seemed to be free in the ring, even the prices. As usual, I paid for 10 days and nights. I surrendered myself to a bed the like of which I had not experienced since I left my country, and I woke up early, then breakfast came to my room. Of bread, milk, cheese, butter, honey, and eggs. I was amazed by the quantity and quality of the food, and I became even more convinced that I was visiting an exciting new world. I left the room moved by eagerness, longing, and hoped that I would also find a bride so that the game of fate could be played out. Kalsham met me at the entrance of the hotel and said to me, "There are shelters at the disposal of travelers to see the important sights." So I thought a little and said, "I would like to start on my own, however I agree." From the first moment, I had the feeling that I was in a big city where the individual dissolved and no one knew about him. In front of the hotel lies a wide, circular square surrounded by buildings and shops. Its middle end is an arch above a river and leads to a small square from which large streets branch out, with no end in sight, surrounded by buildings and trees. Where should I turn, and where is there a bride? How can I walk without a guide? I let my feet guide me freely in the city of freedom, and I was amazed by everything I saw from one step to the next. A network of streets that does not know the first from the last, rows of buildings, houses, and palaces, shops as numerous as the desert sand, displaying an infinite number of colors of goods, factories, shops, and amusement houses, many gardens of many shapes and colors, an endless stream of women, men, and howitzers, rich people. And the elderly, and the poor as well, even if they are of better rank than the poor of Al-Hira and Al-Mashriq, and there is no road without a police night. Men's and women's clothing is diverse, and beauty is abundant, as is elegance. You encounter modesty as well as freedom close to nudity. Seriousness and sobriety are compatible with fun and simplicity. It is as if I am meeting for the first time a human being who has their own presence, weight, and pampering themselves. But how can a human being hope to find a bride in this sea? The roaring one without shore. I walked, got tired, and rested in the gardens, feeling all the time that I had not yet begun. I regretted not taking one of the traveller's howdahs, as Calcium had indicated, but I encountered two interesting incidents. The first of them was an isolated incident that I learned about in a public park. I saw policemen questioning some individuals. Then I learned that the gardener had found the body of a dead woman in the corner of the park. Similar incidents happen everywhere, but what surprised and disturbed me was the passage of a demonstration of women and men shouting their demands, and the policemen followed them without harming them, whether good or bad. I remembered a similar demonstration that I witnessed in my homeland, which went to the governor to complain to him about the increase in taxes and the difficult situation. The demonstration was demanding recognition of the legitimacy of homosexual relations. I could not believe my eyes or ears. I was certain that I was wandering in a strange world, and that a vast abyss separated what was between me and it. Fear of the unknown filled me. Noon approached and the temperature rose to the highest degree, but the summer of the arena was a possible summer. I continued wondering how to return to the hotel, when a voice rang out. In the air he shouts, "God is great." My heart jumped in my chest with a violent leap that set my senses on fire. Oh my God, it's a call to prayer. This is a muezzin calling for prayer. Is the arena an Islamic house? I rushed along, guided by the sound, until I found a mosque at the entrance to a street. I have not heard this sound, nor seen this sight, for a quarter of a century. I am being born again, as if I discovered God for the first time. I entered the mosque, performed ablution, stood in line, and began to pray the noon prayer with radiant joy, with tearful eyes and a joyful chest. The prayer was completed and the people moved on, but I remained in my place until nothing remained in the mosque except the imam and me. I ran towards him, wrapped him in my arms, and kissed him. He surrendered to my emotion calmly and consciously with a smile, then muttered, "Welcome, stranger." We sat not far from the mihrab. I introduced myself to him, and he introduced himself to me, Sheikh Hamada al-Subki, one of the staunch people of the ring. I said with shaky breaths and a shaking voice, I did not imagine that the ring was an Islamic house. He said calmly, "The ring is not from the lands of Islam." When he read my surprise, he said, "The arena is the abode of freedom. All religions are represented there. Muslims, Jews, Christians, Buddhists, and even atheists and pagans." I became even more astonished and asked him, "How did this happen to her, my lord?" He said simply, "It was originally pagan, and its freedom provided the opportunity for everyone who wished to call to his religion, and the religions of its people were distributed, and today only a few pagans remain in some oases." So I asked him, my interest growing, to what religion does the state adhere to? The state has nothing to do with religions. How do you reconcile between the sects and the bees? He said clearly, treat everyone as complete equality. So I asked him like a protester, are they satisfied with that? Every sect maintains its own traditions, and respect prevails in public relations. There is no privilege for a sect even if the head of state comes from it. And by the way, I tell you that our current president is a pagan. An amazing and mind-blowing house. And I thought, thinking, a freedom I had never heard of before. Have you heard, my lord, the talk of the demonstration demanding recognition of the legitimacy of abnormal relationships? The imam said with a smile, there are Muslims too. There is no doubt that they are subject to punishment within their sect. The sheikh took off his turban, he wiped his head and then returned it, saying, freedom is the sacred value recognized by everyone. I protested, this is a freedom that exceeds Islamic limits. But the ring is also sacred in Islam. I said, feeling disappointed, if our prophet were sent today, he would deny this aspect of your Islam. He in turn asked, if he, peace and blessings be upon him, had been sent, would he not have denied all of your Islam? Ah! The man was honest and humiliated me with his question, and the Imam said, I traveled around the lands of Islam a lot. I said sadly, that is why I made my journey, Sheikh Hamada. I wanted to see my homeland from afar, and to see it in the light of the rest of the country, so that perhaps I could say a useful word to it. The Sheikh said approvingly, well done, may God grant you success, and you will learn more than one lesson from our house. I said, and my love of inquisitive traveler returned to me, we have, if you please, opportunities to exchange opinions, but can you now provide me with information about the system of government in this strange house? Sheikh Hamada said, it is a unique system. You have not encountered what you have seen and will not encounter you in what you will see. Or the mountain house. I do not know anything about Dar al-Jabal to include it in the comparison. What is correct for you to know is that the president of our state is elected according to scientific, moral and political specifications. He rules for 10 years, then he retires and is replaced by a chief judge, and new elections are held between the retiring president and the new candidates. I chanted enthusiastically, good regime. It would have been better for Muslims to preach about it before others. The president has a council of people with expertise in all activities who assist him with opinions. Is his opinion binding? In case of disagreement, they all retire, and elections are held again. I chanted, yes, the system. Sheikh Hamada al-Subki continued his speech, as for agriculture, industry and trade, they are carried out by the able people. I said as I remembered some of the scenes I had seen, that is why there are rich and poor. The Sheikh said, there are also unemployed people, thieves and murderers. I smiled and said in a meaningful tone, perfection belongs to God alone. He said seriously, but we have come a significant way in this path. If only you were applying Sharia law. But you apply it. I said with insistence, the truth is that it does not apply. Commitment here to the reference, which applies in letter and spirit. But the state is committed to security and defense only as far as I imagine. And with public projects that individuals are unable to undertake, such as parks, bridges, and museums, and it has free schools for the brilliant poor, and free hospitals as well, but most of the activities are individual. So I thought carefully and then asked him, perhaps you consider yourselves the happiest people. He shook his head seriously and said, it is a relative ruling, Sheikh Kandil, and it cannot be pronounced with complete confidence as long as there are rich, poor, and criminals. In addition to that, our lives are not devoid of anxiety due to mutual ambitions between us and Al-Hira in the south, and between us and Dar al-Aman in the north. This unique civilization is threatened, and may disappear in a battle, and may deteriorate even with victory if losses overwhelm us. Moreover, religious differences do not always pass peacefully. He asked me about my travel itinerary, and I summarized for him what had happened to me since I left the country. The man felt sad for me and wished me success. He said, I advise you to buy a tourist hot dog. The capital's landmarks are too numerous to surround by yourself, and we have many other cities worth seeing. As for finding a bride in our home, it is easier than reaching Dar al-Jabal. I said sadly, I fully understand that, but I have another request, which is to visit the Sage of the Ring. He said in amazement, what do you mean? The East has its sage, and the confusion has its sage, but here the centers of knowledge are filled with sages, and you will find in any of them what you want to know and more. I thanked him for his talk and affection, and I got up and said, it is time for me to go. He grabbed me and said, we will have lunch together at my house. I welcomed the invitation. To immerse myself in the life of the ring, we walked together for about a quarter of an hour to a quiet street lined with acacia trees on both sides, and we headed to an elegant building in which the Imam resides on the second floor. I had no doubt that the Imam was from the middle class, but the beauty of the reception room indicated to me the high standard of living in the ring. I came across strange traditions that are considered far from Islam in my country. The Imam's wife and daughter welcomed me, in addition to his 2 sons. We had lunch at the same table and were even served glasses of wine. It is a new world and a new Islam. I was confused by the presence and dignity of women. Since I reached the brink of youth, I have never had a dining table with a woman, not excluding my mother herself. I was confused and ashamed, and did not touch the glass of wine. The Imam said with a smile, leave him to whatever comforts him. I said, I see you take the opinion of Abu Hanifa. He said, we have no need for that, our diligence has not stopped and we drink to keep up with the atmosphere and traditions, but we do not get drunk. His wife was Sitbeta, while Samia, his daughter, was a pediatrician in a large hospital. As for the two sons, they were preparing themselves to become teachers. I was astonished by the mother's outburst and generosity in speaking more than I was astonished by the nudity in the East. We spoke with spontaneity, courage, and frankness, just like men. Samia asked me about life in the land of Islam, and about the role of women in it, and when she learned about her reality, she criticized it harshly, and began making comparisons between him and women during the era of the Messenger, and the role she played, until she said, Islam is withering at your hands, and you are watching. I was also moved by her beauty and youth, and I was doubly affected by my long deprivation and advanced age. The Imam told them part of my life, my journey, and my goal. He said, in any case, he is not one of those who surrender. Samia said to me, you deserve admiration. So I was deeply affected, and the afternoon came and we all performed the prayer behind the Imam, which prompted me to think and meditate more, and I left them in my body, while they occupied deeply the core of my soul, and on the way, a longing for stability, warmth, and love arose in me. Where is my bride? Where is the mountain house? Youth is lost underground, so when will I settle down, start a family, and have offspring? Until when will I remain torn between two calls? The next day, I rented a howdah that took me around the capital's important landmarks, educational centers, castles, major factories, museums, and old neighborhoods. The guide told me that people of different religions represent the lives of their prophets in mosques, churches, and temples. So I announced my desire to watch the biography of our prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. So he took me to the largest mosque in the capital, and I sat among the spectators, and a group of people began to act out the biography in the courtyard of the mosque from its beginning to its end. I saw what I imagined of the Prophet, the companions, and the infidels, which I considered a boldness bordering on disbelief, but I had to see everything worth recording. The person playing the role of the messenger affected me to the extent that I believed him, and I was moved by him with emotion that exceeded all imagination until I saw him in a dream. And I said to myself, what really amazes me is that the faith of these people is sincere and honest. I invited the Imam and his family to lunch at the hotel, and my relationship with them became even stronger. The Sheikh said to me, I will prepare a meeting for you with a distinguished sage called Meram al-Halabi. I thanked him for his interest in me, and we had a good time, and my heart beat with happiness and joy the whole time. The next morning, I left my hotel room to visit Al-Hakim. However, I found many guests gathered in the entrance of the hotel, engaged in a conversation that seemed to interest them to the utmost. The news says that one of the commanders of Al-Hira rebelled against the king, but he failed and fled to the arena. You mean he now resides in the ring? It is said that he resides in an oasis in the ring. The important thing is that the king of Al-Hira demands that he be arrested and handed over to him. But this contradicts the principles of the reference. His request was rejected. Does the matter end there? They are whispering about war. And if Dar al-Aman seized the opportunity and attacked Dar al-Halna? This is the real problem. Anxiety crept into my depths, as I was pursued by wars from house to house. I wanted to go to Al-Hakim, but I was horrified to see the square receiving numerous demonstrations as if it were on schedule. I had to stay in the entrance of the hotel, looking and hearing in complete amazement. A demonstration demanding the extradition of the fugitive leader. A demonstration warning of woe to those who betray him. A demonstration demanding a declaration of war on Al-Hira. A demonstration demanding the preservation of peace at all costs. I was confused, and wondered what a ruler could do in the face of these conflicting opinions. I waited until the square was empty, so I quickly went to the house of Al-Hakim Marham, and I reached there an hour late than scheduled. I was received in an elegant room filled with books, chairs, and a shawl. I found him tall and thin, about 60 years old, with white hair and beard, wearing a light blue cloak. He accepted my apology for being late, welcomed me, and then asked me, which do you prefer, sitting on chairs or sitting in a scarf? I said with a smile, the shelter is more beloved to me. He said, laughing, this is how the Arabs are. I know you. I visited your country and studied your knowledge. I said shyly, I am neither one of my country's scholars nor its philosophers, but I love knowledge, and that is why I undertook this trip. He said calmly and encouragingly, this is enough, and what is your goal for the trip? I thought carefully and then said, visit the mountain house. I didn't know anyone who visited or wrote about it. Haven't you ever thought of visiting her? He said with a smile, he who believes in his mind will be free from everything. Then I said, the mountain house is not my last goal, but I hope to return from it to my homeland with something that will benefit it. Good luck. I said like an apologist, the truth is that I came to listen, not to speak. Do you have a question that concerns you? I said with interest, the life of every people usually unfolds around a basic idea. He sat up and said, that is why knowledge lovers like you ask us how you made your life. And your life is worthy of raising this question. The answer is simple, we made it ourselves. So I followed him in concentration and silence, and he said, there is no credit in this to God. Our first thinker believed that the goal of life is freedom, and from him the first call for freedom was issued, and it continued to be passed down generation after generation. He smiled, and was silent until his words settled in my soul, and he said, thus, every freedom was considered a good and every restriction an evil. We established a system of government that freed us from tyranny, we sanctified work to free us from poverty, we created science to free us from ignorance, and so on. And so on. It is a long road. Endless. I memorized every word that came from him with great interest, but he continued his speech, saying, the path to freedom was not easy, and we paid its price in sweat and blood. We were prisoners of superstition and tyranny, and the pioneers advanced, and necks were beheaded, and revolutions broke out, and civil wars broke out, until freedom was victorious and science was victorious. I bowed my head in admiration. He began to criticize the regimes of Dar al-Mashriq and Dar al-Hira, and mocked them. Rather, he also ridiculed the regime of Dar al-Aman, which I had not yet visited, and even Dar al-Islam was not spared from the sharpness of his tongue. It seemed that he read a change in my face, so he remained silent. Then he said in an apologetic tone, you are not accustomed to free opinion. I said calmly, within certain limits. He said backing away, sorry, but you have to reconsider everything. I said in defense, your home is not devoid of poor people and deviants. He said enthusiastically, freedom is a responsibility that only those who are capable can undertake, and not everyone who belongs to the arena is worthy of this affiliation. There is no place for the infirm among us. I wondered warmly, isn't mercy as valuable as freedom? This is what people of different religions say, and they are the ones who encourage the disabled to stay. As for me, I do not find the meaning of words like mercy or justice. We must first agree on who deserves mercy and who deserves justice. I disagree with you on that until the end. I know that. Maybe you welcome war. He said clearly, if you promise more freedom, I have no doubt at all that our victory over confusion and security is the best guarantee for the happiness of their people. On this occasion, I adhere to the principle of jihad in Islam. He began to explain it aggressively, so I tried to correct his theory, but he waved his hand dismissively and said, you have a great principle, but you do not have enough courage to admit it. I asked him, to which religion do you belong, Hakim Maham? He replied with a smile, a religion whose God is reason and whose messenger is freedom. And all the wise men like you? He said, laughing, I wish I could claim that. He came to me with 2 books, the first is, The Reference or the First Law in the Ring, and the second is written by him and its title is, Storming the Impossible. He said, read these 2 books and you will know the ring for what it really is. So I thanked him for his generosity and his hospitality, then I bid him farewell and left, and had lunch at the hotel, while everyone was talking about war. In the afternoon, I went to the mosque and prayed behind Sheikh Hamad al-Subki. He invited me to sit with him, so I happily accepted. Suddenly he asked me, smiling, have you found a bride? I said seriously, attachment to a bride is a meaningless illusion. He confirmed my statement, saying, this is the truth. Then he asked me after a short silence, are you continuing your journey with the first caravan? I said, feeling a little embarrassed, no, I want to stay another while. A good decision and consistent with successive events. The king of Al-Hira banned the movement of convoys between Al-Hira and Al-Hayla as a response to our refusal to hand over the fugitive commander. I was astonished and worried, and the sheikh said, the major landowners and men of industry and trade became angry and held a dangerous meeting with the ruler, demanding a declaration of war. So I wondered with concern, what is Dar al-Aman's position like? The sheikh said with a smile, it is as if you have become one of the people of the ring. The dispute between the ring and Al-Aman revolves around the ownership of some water springs in the desert extending between us and them. The dispute will be settled in favor of Al-Aman immediately. So that you do not think about treachery. I said anxiously, I am a stranger. And the harbingers of war are flying around me. The best thing to do is to stay in the ring, and if the stay is long, you have enough money to facilitate fruitful work for you. I abandoned the convoy despite my fear that it would be the last convoy to head towards Dar al-Aman. The ring pulled me tightly to it, because of the purity I found in its atmosphere, and the hope that I sensed in some of its people. I divided my time between tourism and the family of Sheikh Hamid al-Subki. As for a bride, she was flying with the stars of the night, and daily life was saturated with thoughts of war, and many resented the concessions that Dar al-Aman obtained without shedding a single drop. Blood, and the hotel manager said to me grimly, despite our sacrifice of springs, the safe house may betray us. My nerves became extremely tense and their infection spread to me, and I became afflicted with what had befallen the people around me, and I was terrified by the limited hours I spent in a unit in the hotel, between tourism and the al-Subki family. My nerves were aroused, demanding satisfaction and stability. When the ring declared war and sent its army to Al-Hira, my nerves became even more aroused, and I began to dig through the red storm for a safe cave to take refuge in. People talked about the war, and they balanced forces and capabilities, and I became violently confined to seeking reasons for satisfaction and stability. I forgot everything except this immediate goal, as if I were in a race or a chase, and I was encouraged to do so by the family atmosphere and Samia's sincere friendship for me, her admiration for the traveler, and her compassion for his long sorrows. I said to myself, she is a perfect girl, and I have no life without her. I said to the Sheikh Imam, I put my trust in God and decided to get married. The Sheikh asked, have you found a bride? I said timidly, Aruza is finished, anyway. Did you choose anyone? I said quietly, my request is with you. He smiled encouragingly and asked, will you marry a traveler or a resident? I said honestly, I don't think the dream will fade away. Everything depends on her will. Why don't you talk to her yourself? I was confused and said, it would be better for you to act on my behalf. He said sympathetically, so be it. I understand your position. I received approval the next day. I was eager and they responded to me. I rented an apartment on the same street. We cooperated to furnish it. The meeting was held in a calm manner befitting the circumstances of war. We brought the marital home together, and my heart was happy and I regained my balance. News of the fighting was encouraging, but sadness made its way into many hearts and the prices of countless commodities rose. Sheikh Hamid al-Subki suggested that I participate in a shop that sells antiques and jewelry, and I enthusiastically agreed. My partners were two Christian brothers, and their shop was located in the hotel square. The work required that I stay in the shop with them during the day, so I went to work, for the first time in my life, with praiseworthy energy. Samia was spending the same time in the hospital. She said to me, you must make the ring your permanent home. Complete your journey if you wish, but return here. I also said frankly, I may think that I will return to my homeland as I had planned to copy my book, and there is no harm in residing here. She said with pleasure, in this case, I will accompany you to your homeland back and forth, but as for permanent residence, we will not find anything like the ring in its civilization. I hesitated a little, then said, I imagine that my new job will provide us with abundant livelihood. Doesn't that make you think about resigning from your job in the hospital? She laughed sweetly and said, work in our house is sacred for both men and women. From now on, you must think like a man in the arena. I looked at her stomach tenderly and said, you are like a mother, Samia. She said cheerfully, this is my business. Motherhood became clear to the eye as summer turned its last pages. Autumn breezes arrived filled with moisture and cloud shadows. And every day I discover something new in the world of my beloved wife. She is proud of herself without arrogance, fond of discussion, and a sincere believer with the strength to open my heart to her. Perhaps the most amazing thing I encountered on my journey is the Islam of the ring, which rages in the contradiction between its exterior and interior. She said to me, the difference between our Islam and your Islam is that our Islam does not close the door to ijtihad, and Islam without ijtihad means Islam without reason. Her saying reminded me of my old teacher's lessons. However, I was in love with the female in it, and her navigation satisfied my deprived instinct. I pursued that woman voraciously, indifferent to anything else, but her personality was too true and strong to dissolve in the woman's mature womanhood. I found myself face to face with brilliant intelligence, enlightened opinion, and excellent kindness, and I was convinced of her superiority over me in many matters. This upset me, as I had never seen a woman as anything but a pleasure for a man, and my fondness for her was mixed with caution and fear, but reality demanded that I adapt to the new, and meet it halfway, out of concern for it and for my available happiness, and I said to myself, it is a secret that she gave herself to me so generously, and that I really lucky. To address my hidden fears, I once said to her, you, Samia, are a priceless treasure. She said to me frankly, the idea of the traveler who sacrifices security for the sake of truth and goodness fascinates me very much, Candil. It reminded me of my dormant project. You woke me up from a slumber of comfort and honey, of love, fatherhood, and civilization. And I said, as if to encourage those who were desperate for reality, I will be the first to write about Dar al-Jabal. She said, laughing, perhaps you will find it far from a dream. I said with determination, then I will be the first to dispel the dream. Autumn has arrived and winter has arrived. Its cold is not harsher than the cold of my country, but it rains abundantly, and its sun is only seen at rare times. The winds become strong and raw, and the thunder strikes tremendously, leaving its impact deep in the soul. People talked about the war that did not want to end, and I shared their emotion sincerely. I hoped that freedom would triumph over the God King, and that my awaited child would be born in the arms of freedom and safety. Samia joined me at our house one evening, returning from work, shining with joy that revived her freshness that had been exhausted by pregnancy, and she chanted, "Rejoice, this is victory." She started taking off her coat and saying, "The army of Al-Hira surrendered, the God King committed suicide, Al-Hira and the Levant became an extension of the arena, and freedom and civilization were written for their peoples." Joy moved to my heart, but some fears stemming from past experiences made me wonder, will they not pay the price for defeat in some way? She said enthusiastically, the principles of the reference are clear, and no obstacle remains standing on the path to freedom except Dar al-Aman. I said innocently, in any case, she did not betray you, and you are suffering from a long war. I said sharply, this is true, but it is an obstacle on the path to freedom. The day the victorious army returned was a memorable day. Men and women came out to the ring to welcome him and shower him with flowers, despite the cold weather and the rain. Celebrations at all levels continued for a full week. I soon noticed, between the road and my workplace in the hotel square, that a strange situation, contrary to joy, was prevailing strongly, without hesitation or caution. Rumors spread about the number of dead and wounded, accompanied by distress and grief. Leaflets were distributed accusing the state of sacrificing the lives of its people not to liberate the peoples of the Levant and Al-Hira, but for the sake of the interests of landowners, factories, and stores, and that it was a war of caravans without principles. I received another post accusing the authors of the previous posts of being enemies of freedom and agents of Dar al-Aman. As a result, noisy demonstrations took place attacking Dar al-Aman and challenging the agreement to cede water springs to it. The ruler met with a council of experts, and a unanimous decision was issued to cancel the water springs agreement and to consider the springs as joint property between the circuit and al-Aman, as was the case in the past. People started talking again about a possible new war between the two houses of the ring and al-Aman. Sheikh al-Subki and his family came to have lunch at my table, and we sat chatting and exchanging opinions. I said to the Sheikh like a protester, if this turmoil was the result of a decisive victory, what would it have been like if it had come as a result of a defeat? He answered me with a smile, this is the nature of freedom. I said frankly, it reminds me of chaos. He said, laughing, this is the case for those who have not dealt with freedom. I said bitterly, I thought you were a happy people, but you are people torn apart by hidden differences. There is no cure except more freedom. How do you morally judge the cancellation of the water spring agreement? He said seriously, yesterday I was visiting the sage Marham al-Halabi, and he told me, the liberation of human beings is more important than these peels. I shouted, peels. A moral basis must be recognized. Otherwise, the world will turn into a jungle. Samia said, laughing, but it was and still is a forest. The Imam said, look, O Candil, your homeland is the abode of Islam, so what do you find in it? A tyrannical ruler who rules according to his whims. Where is the moral basis? And clerics volunteer religion to serve it. Where is the moral basis? A people who only think about their food. Where is the moral basis? A lump came to my throat, so I remained silent. The memory of the trip came back to me, and I asked, will war break out soon? Samia said, it will not happen unless one of the parties feels stronger, or if it is overcome by despair. My mother-in-law asked, perhaps you are thinking about the trip. I said smilingly, I must first check on Samia. Samia gave birth to her first child in late winter, and instead of preparing to leave, I surrendered to a soft life, between home and shop. I immerse myself in the ring, in love, abundant livelihood, fatherhood, friendship, the treasures of the sky, and the gardens whose beauty has no end. I never dreamed of anything more beautiful than that which lasted, and the days passed until I became a father to Mustafa, Hamd, and Hisham. However, I refused to admit defeat, and I used to say to myself in shame, oh my country. Oh my homeland. I was recording some numbers in the ledger of the antique shop when I found a bride in front of me. What I see is neither a dream nor an illusion. She is a bride in a short skirt and a skirt embroidered with pearls, which respectable class women wear in the summer. She is no longer young, nor is she free and naked, but she is still crowned with a dignified, modest beauty. It was like a miracle that emerged from the impossible. She was turning a coral necklace in her hands, and I looked at it in amazement. She turned to me and her eyes locked on my face, widening, and she forgot herself as I forgot myself. I called out in supplication, bride. I replied in astonishment, Candil. We stared at each other until we decided at the same time to wake up from our stupor and return to reality. I got up to her and we shook hands, forgetting the surprise that befell my partner, and I asked her, how are you? It's okay, everything is fine. Residing here in the ring? Since I left the confusion. After hesitation, I asked, alone? She is married to a Buddhist man. And you? Married and father. I didn't have children. I hope you are happy. My husband is a virtuous and pious man, and I have converted to his religion. When did you get married? 2 years ago. I'm desperate to find you. It's a big city. How was your life before marriage? She waved her hand resentfully and said, it was a year of suffering and torment. I muttered, what a pity. Basima said, the ending is good. We will take a trip to Dar al-Aman, and from there to Dar al-Jabal, then we will travel to India. I said warmly, may God's blessing be upon you everywhere. She extended her hand to me and we shook hands. She took her purchase, then left peacefully. I found myself asked to shed light on the situation in front of my two partners. I continued my work, suppressing my emotions, with the firm belief that everything was over. I confessed to Samia what had happened, with simplicity and indifference, and I was not without a feeling of guilt over the excessive interest I felt. It shook violently, and springs of sorrow and longing exploded from its walls. Hot waves from the past flooded him until they drowned him, and I do not rule out that the old love raised its head to be resurrected, but the new reality was heavier and stronger than the winds could tamper with it. However, the latent desire for the journey was wonderfully awakened and leapt to the forefront, looking forward to tomorrow with a firm and unyielding will. I was afraid that I would rush into its implementation and bring suspicion upon myself. So I made a decision to postpone it for a year, on the condition that I prepare for it during the year in a way that prepares people to accept it. It was My beloved wife gave me permission without enthusiasm or apathy, and appointed Sheikh Imam on my behalf to take my place in trade until my return. She allocated for the trip enough dinars to provide me with a decent life, and I promised to return to the arena after the trip, on the condition that I would accompany my wife and children to Dar al-Islam, so I would copy the book for the trip. He threw the remaining members of my family alive, then we returned to the ring. I satisfied my longings with Samia, Mustafa, Hamd, and Hisham, and left my wife as she welcomed a new life inside her.